Whipple Family Misadventures Book 7, Mischief in Their Eyes, Chapter 8.
Okay,
Sonic said, rubbing his hands together as his eyes sparkled with energy.
this will be easy. I'll distract her away from the cart and you two get the quill back. It won't even take 5 minutes. When you get it, come back here, and when I see you're no longer at her cart, I'll come back.
That's your plan? How are you going to distract her? You can't be seen.
Beaming, Sonic took off so fast he was only a blur inside the room, then looking like he was in multiple spots at the same time, before he reappeared in front of them.
She won't be able to see me. Now come on.
Wait a minute. We need to make sure we won't get locked out of the room again, like last time.
All three of them stared up at the door for a long moment, thinking. For some reason, the doors in this place were always locked from the outside. Shadow had no idea how Tom and their dad were able to open the doors the way they did.
We could stick something in the door so it doesn't shut all the way.
Silver suggested picking up a book that their dad had been reading the night before. Sonic perked up.
Excellent. One of you do that while I keep her busy.
The three of them slowly opened the heavy door and peered down the long hallway, just poking their heads out of the room long enough to get a quick look. The lady with the cart had pushed it towards the elevator, but left it alongside the wall and was near another room.
Don't forget, ours is in the one in front of the painting.
Shadow whispered, pointing to the large painting of something red and orange and yellow across from their room.
Got it.
Sonic answered and shot off in a blast of wind. A few moments later, they heard him calling and taunting the lady from around a corner until she finally stepped away from the cart and went to investigate. After Shadow carefully jammed the book between the door and the wall, he and Silver crept down the hallway. The cart was large and intimidating, towering over them, stuffed to the brim with items like towels and cleaning supplies. At first glance, neither of them saw what they needed to find.
Are you sure it was a quill she found?
Shadow nodded and started going through some of the stuff he could reach. Some he recognized and some he didn't.
You look at the high stuff and I'll look down here.
Above him, Shadow could hear Silver mumbling to himself as he began sorting.
Oh, look, candy.
He said and then started stuffing it in his pocket.
Silver?
Shadow growled. He knew they didn't have much time and couldn't waste it with candy. There was no telling how much longer Sonic would be able to keep her away. There was a gasp above him.
I got it.
Silver said enthusiastically and waved the quill in the air back and forth proudly. Reaching up, Shadow took it from him and examined it carefully just to make sure, and nodded. There was the sound of a door opening behind them and a woman came out. She had obviously heard Silver when he spoke. Frantically looking around, Shadow saw no other option, nowhere else to run or hide. On the side of her cart was a large bin, stuffed full of used sheets, towels, and other bedding. Jumping into it, Shadow yanked Silver down with him, out of sight, and covered themselves under the towels. Not a moment too soon, for mere seconds later, those footsteps approached the cart, and long shadows were cast over them. Then they heard another woman approach. Next to him, Silver curled into a ball, wrapping a towel around himself for more covering. It was at that moment Shadow realized they couldn't just sit there and wait for the ladies to go away. They would be spotted trying to climb down and run back to their rooms. They needed another way to get back. Reaching out, Shadow grabbed the hem of his brother's hoodie and closed his eyes, thinking of the small hotel room that they had been staying in, picturing it in his mind. He had only done this for the first time yesterday, and yet he really needed to be able to do it again. Even more so, he needed to be able to teleport with Silver as well. But despite how much he focused, nothing happened. The cart started to move, thrust into motion by a person pushing it, and that alone terrified him. They couldn't be taken away. They had to get out of there, and they had to get back to their room. If he didn't figure out how to teleport, they would get found out. He had to do this. He had to do. And then, in the space between a breath, Shadow suddenly appeared back in the room next to the bed, still halfway under a bunch of bedding.
I did it.
Shadow whispered, looking around to make sure it was the right room. To his relief, there was Silver's plush toy and their comics where they had left them. Standing up, he said louder, utter relief and joy spilling over in his voice as he had finally figured out how to do it.
Silver, I did it. We're back in our room. I got us out of there.
The door opened and Sonic zipped back in, letting the door slam behind him.
Did you get it?
Holding the quill up in the air, Shadow jumped off the bed, still in disbelief and relief and joy over what had just happened.
And not only that, I was able to teleport back, both of us back in here, so we wouldn't get seen.
Really? You did?
Shadow nodded proudly. The fact that he was able to finally figure out how to unlock and use his power made him so much happier, especially since he was using it to help out, like the other two did.
That's so cool. The stuff we did is working.
Sonic said excitedly and then out of nowhere, threw both arms around Shadow in a tight hug.
See, I said it would be easy. That was like 3 minutes, and our dads were never going to ever know.
At first, Shadow wasn't sure if he liked being hugged so suddenly and without being asked, and then decided it was okay.
We did it.
Yeah, we did it.
She repeated and looked over his shoulder.
Wait a minute. Where's Silver? And where did all that come from?
Shadow turned.
He's right there. We had to hide in the bin with all the dirty laundry. Some of it came with us.
His brother hadn't moved, was still curled up along with the towels and extra bedding that had come with them. They would have to find something to do with that before their dads got back.
Silver, you can come out now.
No response. Scowling, Shadow jumped back on the bed and started tugging at his brother's hoodie, not understanding what his brother was up to.
Silver?
Until he realized, and he held up the empty garment.
He's not here.
Looking back up at Sonic as panic bloomed in his chest.
I didn't teleport him. I only took his hoodie. I left him behind in that bin on her cart.
It made him remember how he had scolded Silver for coming after him the day before, but now that was the other way around. He understood. That was his brother, and he was alone out there in an unfamiliar world full of humans where it wasn't safe. He couldn't stay in the room and feverishly hoped Silver would come back safely. He had to do something. Hurriedly, he ran towards the door with Sonic on his heels, and the two of them peered down the hallway. But the woman, and more importantly, the cart full of items, and his brother, was long gone.
She couldn't have gone far. I'll distract her again. Make sure to put something to block the door.
That said, he shot off once again. Shadow was glad Sonic had reminded him. He hadn't even thought of that. Once it was clear, Shadow blocked the door so they could get back in and ran down the hallway and turned the corner. To his relief, the cart was tucked against the wall. The lady hadn't disappeared. She had just moved on. They had no time to waste. Shadow banged his fist up against the bin.
Silver, come on.
When he didn't hear anything, he grabbed the edge and used his arm to pull himself up so he could look over into the bin, and then gasped as dread hit him like a truck. It was completely empty. Silver was terrified. One moment Shadow had been next to him inside the laundry bin, and the next he had disappeared in a blink of light. Even stranger, taking his hoodie away, but leaving him behind. Worse, that lady was still there. He could hear her humming and talking to herself. He didn't dare move. All he could do was stay curled up tightly under a few towels and hope she didn't dig around in the bin, or she would have found him. The most frustrating part was he didn't know how or why Shadow had left him there. Then the entire cart was still moving until it stopped and someone reached down, picked up the entire bin with him still in, and turned it on its side, dumping him and all of the towels and bedding out. Instead of being dropped on the floor and being found out in front of that lady, Silver fell, tumbling head over heels several times, still wrapped up in that towel and unable to see what was happening, until he hit a very soft pad with a grunt. Slowly, Silver untangled himself from the towels and the sheets that covered him and looked around. He was no longer in that hallway. He was in a massive room that smelled like cleaners, full of loud, thumping machines. They looked a bit like the ones back at home that his dad used to wash his clothes, but these ones were much larger. There were other carts full of junk lined against one of the walls and stacked of folded towels and sheets and blankets everywhere. At the moment, it was empty. Looking upward, there was a long vertical tunnel above him, apparently so they could toss bedding down it and it would go down here. For a second, he thought about just floating back up, but he didn't know which one led to the hallway he was supposed to go. Plus, that lady had dumped him down in the first place might have still been at the top. Without his hoodie, Silver was a lot colder. It had been several days since Shadow had shaved his fur off, but it was still taking a very long time for it to grow back. With how long his fur had been before, his dad had said it might be weeks before it returned to that length. Currently, there was only a little bit of fuzz, not nearly enough to stay warm. He picked up a towel that didn't smell and wrapped it around himself like a shawl, both to keep warm and to cover his tail and quills from view. Before this, he hadn't been able to figure out why humans wore clothes, but if it was like this for them all the time, he understood it now. Taking a deep breath, Silver went to the door and peered out into a new and unfamiliar hallway. Like every other hallway in this stupid hotel, there were lots and lots of doors, all of them locked, most likely. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be back upstairs in the hotel room. His dad had been very upset over what happened the day before when they had all left the room. He would be furious if he found out about this. Silver took a deep breath and ran, hoping he could find the stairs and get back up to where he was supposed to be, until he heard something. Stopping, he backed up and lingered near a door, straining his ears so he could hear the conversation through it.
I'm sure it was another one of those aliens, barely taller than my knee, black and red bird. The thing looked terrified, like it didn't know what it was doing inside a building full of humans.
Silver's eyes widened as he realized the man speaking inside the room was talking about Shadow. He had mentioned that someone had seen him, and now Silver happened to be outside the same room as the person who was talking about him.
I don't know. It just ran off as soon as it spotted me, and I didn't see where it went. A real shame. I think having a second one around would help improve the situation immensely. The little thing has been struggling to adjust, and it's only going to get worse when we leave.
Shocked, Silver could barely believe his ears. No wonder that man hadn't been scared or confused when he had spotted his brother. They had another one with them. And whoever it was, they weren't doing so well. For one wild moment, he considered knocking on the door and asking questions in an attempt to figure out more about the situation. But he heard a door slam shut behind him and another voice further down, and he knew he had to leave. Looking around, the door he was listening at was on the left side of the hallway, not that far down from the big room full of laundry. Carefully, Silver used his psychokinesis to take a little bit out of the hall. Out of the wall, leaving a little mark there so he could find it again. That done, the gray hedgehog turned and ran as fast as he could. Quickly, he found the stairs and hurried up them, wheezing and gasping the whole time. He ran past two men holding hands, who stopped and stared at him, but he didn't pay the slightest bit of attention to them, only focused on trying to figure out which floor was his and getting back to where he was supposed to be. The entire morning, Wade was thinking about his voice and not his job. Mostly, he was thinking about what Tom had said about them the day before, and the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. Neither of them had any impulse control, and both had very sparse critical thinking skills. Part of that was the fact that they were both 11-year-olds, which was fair. If they had been human and born on Earth and had grown up with normal childhoods, it wasn't like they would have been much better. Whatever the case, he was going to start working on it with both of them, mostly because he was getting tired of the two of them rooting out every bit of mischief they could, in what seemed like from the lack of those two important skills. Wade wasn't sure exactly how, but he was going to find a way to work on it. He was driving back to the hotel with Tom, just picked up food for all 5 of them, lost in the middle of thought when he realized something.
Oh no.
Everything okay?
I might have forgotten to put the do not disturb sign on this morning.
Wade admitted slowly. He had been so caught up in being worried about leaving them alone, it had completely slipped his mind. He couldn't believe he had been so careless, especially when it came to the safety of his own kids. A look of horror and disbelief came over Tom's face, and then he attempted to smooth out into something more relaxed and calm.
Maybe room service hasn't gone to your room yet.
Or we'll get back and see that the room service found them, and that the hotel called the police, the FBI, and animal control to take them away.
Wade was already picturing the worst. He drove back to the hotel as fast as he could without breaking the law. As soon as they parked, both of them shot out of the car, hurried inside, ran up the stairs, and went back to the room as quickly as possible to check on the boys.